Lauren Lambert with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and today I am thrilled to sit down with Rick Stover, our First Step Act subject matter expert here at the BOP. Rick, thank you so much for joining me today to answer a few questions that we're hearing from the field. On behalf of the Bureau, you wanted to provide an update on our recent efforts with the First Step Act implementation, and also clear up some common confusion around how it intersects with the Second Chance Act in terms of transitioning individuals from our facilities to the community. Can you start by giving us a high-level overview of what you've been focusing on lately?
Sure. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you for having this conversation. I think it's going to be an important conversation to both staff, inmates, and advocates as well. As everybody knows, FSA has been part of the fabric of the Bureau of Prisons since its implementation in December of 2018. It's really part of virtually everything that we do. When Director Marshall started, it was very interesting. On his very first day in the office, before he could even get situated, he and I had a chance to sit down and we discussed about the issues with FSA. And I was kind of surprised, him coming from West Virginia, that he even had knowledge of the First Step Act. But he knew enough to know that we needed to improve the First Step Act. So we began those conversations, he and I. And although I've just been in this role for a couple weeks, really, I've been working behind the scenes with Director Marshall, with Deputy Director Smith for the better part of a few months now. And I'm proud to say that we've made drastic improvements. And I wanted to take the opportunity today, having this conversation with you and for our audience, to go over some of those recent improvements, if I could. The first thing I wanted to start with, and it's important, and I'm sure we're going to dive into this a little bit, it's going to be with the advancements on the program that actually calculates the time credits. It's no secret, we've run into some issues with this historically, and I don't want to talk about those issues today. I really want to talk about where we're at right now. So I'm proud to say, and we're gonna really drill into this here as part of this, but I'm proud to say that the advancements that we've made from our IT division within the BOP has in fact given us a product that First Step Act credits are calculated correctly. I'll repeat that later, but I just want everyone to know that the First Step Back time credits are in fact being calculated correctly. We'll go back to that in a bit. I also wanted to mention some of the advancements that have been made on the reentry side of the house, specifically with Reentry Services Division. Some of the numbers that has happened across the board as far as the improvements in how many inmates are placed in home confinement and RRCs, the residential reentry centers, has been great. It hasn't been to the point where we're going to sit at the top of a mountaintop and broadcast these headlines, but it has been gradual progress. Most recent figures that I got just yesterday was about 8,400 inmates are currently in RRCs and about 4,200 inmates are in home confinement. Big numbers to point out, especially on the home confinement side of the house. That 4,200 number represents a number that we have not seen since before the pandemic. So proud to point that out, and we continue to head in a positive direction as far as that goes. One of the other advancements, improvements that we've made just in recent months with the FSA time credit implementation has been with the Designations and Sentence Computation Center. There's a popular misnomer that the DSCC is heavily involved with FSA time credit calculations. They are not. But we're becoming more and more involved. And so what we did was, with the leadership of Director Marshall, we developed a DSCC triage team. That triage team essentially works hand in hand with our Reentry Services Division, and it does two things. The first thing is we worked with inmates who are currently in the community, and we were seeing an issue. And the issue was, we were seeing that inmates weren't benefiting from all the time that they could potentially be placed in the community with the combination of First Step Act and Second Chance Act, which I know we're going to get into. So what this team did was we reviewed 3,500 cases. And of those 3,500 cases, we found that there was a large number, around 2,800 inmates, who could have benefited potentially from movement from RRCs into home confinement. So we took that information, DSCC specifically, took that information, relayed that to Reentry Services, and I'm happy to report that they reviewed all 2,800 of those cases and 800 inmates were, within several weeks of that endeavor, placed into home confinement. So hence you see that increase. We continue to do that. The DSCC will continue to be involved with this in some form or fashion. So we're hopeful moving forward that we continue to see these advancements. The other thing I wanted to mention, again, recent improvements, is we've heard a lot over the last really years when it comes to FSA. One of the biggest complaints that we got is a lack of training, that our staff just don't have the training necessary. So with the help of our Management Specialty Training Center out in Aurora, the folks at MSTC worked with the folks from Correctional Programs Division, and they put together, I think it's a 60-slide presentation that's available on our internal website on Sallyport, that staff can go there. It's narrated. They can go slide by slide. They can review it as much and often as they would like. Now, even though that's designed for the case managers, anybody can do that. As I said, FSA is intertwined in the fabric of the BOP. So whether that is wardens, AWs, unit managers, recreation specialists, officers, it's beneficial to everyone to know that information. That specific presentation is really focuses on what we're talking about here, and the FSA time credit calculation, the Second Chance Act, cumulative effect that we'll go into. So I just want to let everyone know that we did that. Also, we took a sanitized version of that, took out all the Century rosters and whatnot, and we worked with the folks to put that on our public website. So now a lot of the public is out there asking questions about First Step Act and how do these time credits work, and we're happy to report, they have to watch the video, but we're happy to report that is available on the public website, and so we refer to them continually, and we'll continue to do so. So we're hoping that under Director Marshall's leadership, he's made it clear FSA is a priority for him. It's a priority for the Deputy Director as well. And so it's a priority for me, and it's a priority for our staff. So we are dedicated to getting this thing right.
Rick, that is so encouraging to hear. So let's really dive in. You've emphasized that our recent improvements to calculating First Step Act time credits are truly effective. Could you elaborate on why it's so crucial to reassure the public that we're getting this right, and how exactly those credits are being applied in practice?
Sure. To answer that question, I'm going to go back a little bit. So a couple years ago, 3 years ago or so, I was warden at Danbury, Connecticut. So as a warden, obviously it was in a different position. There was a different perspective that I had on FSA. So it was kind of more of a field perspective, if you will. Very common for me to go to Mainline, walk around either the FCI inside where the men were, out at the Federal Satellite Low, or at the camp where the females were. And there was a common theme. And the common theme was inmates would come to me with a time credit worksheet. And the question would go something like, here's my time credits, why am I not home? And it became a recurring theme, and I know enough about it I started to look at it, and I thought the same thing. Why are they still in prison if they had passed certain dates? So when we started to, as a warden, when I started to dive into that, it was evident that we were missing something as an agency. And what we were missing was consistent with the statute. The way that the time credits work is, it says that you have to actually earn the credits before the credits can be applied. So you got to earn them before you can apply them. So that's what the statute says. The BOP didn't make that up. We're going with what the law is. So back then, now we're going back a few years now. Back then, we would have a time credit worksheet, or the inmates would have a time credit worksheet, and what it was showing was actual dates earned. That's important to note, because what had happened was we were, as an agency, apprehensive to do projections back then. We were apprehensive to do conditional dates back then. FSA, very, very different than good conduct time. If anybody's familiar with good conduct time, and we won't go into the details of it, but good conduct time essentially gives you 54 days off per year, 85% of your sentence. That's what the law says. And there's very few ways to lose that. Usually it deals with disciplinary issues. FSA is much different. FSA, you have to either be opting in or opting out, and it's based on a variety of factors, based on your needs, based on you getting assessed, and then basically you have to follow through on the recommended programs and always be opting in. You have to be in a certain admission status as well inside the institution. If you go outside the institution by regulation, you stop earning the credits. So what was happening is we could not, as an agency, at that time, we thought it was not in our best interest to do calculations ahead of time. Instead, it was just actual time. Now, in hindsight, that was a difficult decision to make, and I'll tell you why. So we were doing our staff and the inmates a little bit of a disservice. So what we were doing was the case managers would wait until the actual days were earned under FSA before placing a referral into the RRM office. And what was happening was the inmates would go to the case managers during their team or otherwise, and they would say, hey, if you were to project these dates out, I should be put in for placement in RRC last week, last month, today, whatever the case may be. And the case manager, through no fault of their own, said, well, I don't know. The sheet tells me this. I don't know exactly what your date's going to be. I'm not going to do the math. The formula is going to do that for me. And so what we were finding out was case managers were oftentimes waiting to do the referral. And the inmates were then, once the date was approved, because months and months and months had passed by the time that referral was approved because of a backlog really in the RRCs, they would get a date and the date would already be beyond the date for the amount of time credits that the inmate earned. That's a problem. That is a problem because unlike Second Chance Act, again, we'll talk about that in a bit, but unlike Second Chance Act, the language under FSA is very definitive. It's will and shall. These credits will and shall be applied. So what we were doing is we were placing inmates. They weren't late releases, and I want you in the audience to understand that. They were not late releases. What they were situations where they were eligible to be placed in the community on a certain date, yet they were placed in the community on a date after that. Not a, quote, late release, because they still had their sentence to serve, but within the discretionary authority of the BOP, we could have placed them in either an RRC or home confinement. So that was happening back then. Yeah. That was a mistake. In hindsight, it was a mistake. And so working with all the divisions, we knew that we had to correct that, and so we did. So we began doing an update to the calculation. The update to the calculation basically did now conditional placement dates. It's tricky, still tricky, because what we run into a lot of times is now that we do these calculations, and there's rules to this, and it's all spelled out in the policy. You have to be serving a time for an offense which is not disqualifying per the law. You have to have a pattern score that's minimum or low in order to apply the credits. It can get somewhat convoluted. Our case managers, I know, as they're watching this, they certainly understand that, and we make sure that they do understand that. So it's important to note that as we were calculating these dates, there was not an expectation for the inmates that this was a finite guarantee. The inmates generally, for every 30 days served, will earn 15 days of time credits, depending on the category that they're in. Some earn 10 if they don't have 2 consecutive assessments. Again, a little bit of the weeds, don't want to get into that today. But what I do want to get across is the point that the conditional dates are there and they're utilized for a reason. Right now, I can tell you that the conditional dates, when it comes to FSA, they work. With the advancements that we've made on IT, we are absolutely positively calculating FSA dates correctly. Let me repeat that. We are calculating the First Step Back time credits appropriately. Now, there's going to be little blips here and there, certain cases that are going to happen. We run into those on occasion, and if we see a trend, we'll address the trend. We usually will get with either Correctional Programs Division or with IT Division, and we will make corrections to coding. That happens. But it's important to note that those are the anomalies. We are calculating FSA time credits appropriately for inmates across the Bureau of Prisons. We have looked at thousands and thousands of cases to determine we are doing this correctly. I know there's a narrative out there that people are throwing their hands up, and we're bombarded with emails and outside advocates and interested parties and families that say you're not getting this right. There's improvements to be made, but we are getting the time credit calculations correct. The one other thing that I wanted to add, Lauren, to this is, and this goes to the advancements of the calculations. Several months ago, before Director Marshall took his position, we were, and our IT division had what they were doing with the calculations was they were performing them on a monthly basis. So it was usually the last weekend of the month, but that wasn't always the case. It was somewhat unpredictable, but it was a workflow issue. So the time credits would be calculated towards the end of the month, and that what would happen is the next business day, as the unit team returned to the institution and they would run their rosters, we would have every month we would have inmates that would get what I'll call an immediate release. They weren't, again, beyond their release dates, but they were now at the point where because of the application of the credits of the formula, they were now at a point where their eligibility date had passed. So that created a little bit of an issue because we were seeing it on a monthly basis. So happy to report, with the help of IT, they improved the calculations. So now those calculations are running every day. So now the formula will pick up if there's going to be a change, whether that's opt-in or opt-out status. It's going to reflect that every day. So the case managers don't have to worry about that. Everything is automated, so it will pick up on their rosters. Of course, they have to run their daily rosters, but other than that, let the app do what the app does. I will just take a quick second, just kind of a public service announcement to the case managers out there. We do not want case managers doing manual calculations on these. There are way too many variables, I could not sit there and figure out someone's time credit, their actual placement dates, just because of all the different variables, whether they didn't complete surveys, whether they were placed in FRP refused, whether they were in a hospital status. Way too many to even discuss. So I wanted to stress to folks, if inmates are going to the staff saying, well, I did a manual calculation, can you verify this? We're not going to do that. We're not in the business of doing the manual calculations. We've got the formula working right, the program's working right, and I'm happy to say that we are, as far as the conditional placement dates, they're working.
So what's all the confusion? Can you walk us through how we're instructed to combine FSA credits with Second Chance Act eligibility, and what that means for individuals' actual time in the community?
Great question. Probably out of all the things that I want to get across today, this is probably the thing that I want to focus on the most, and that is the confusion that exists out there. And it has to do with, there was a June 17th memo that the director put out, provided some guidance as far as basically concentrating on inmates that are in halfway houses, making sure that we get the inmates that need to be in the halfway house, the one that need the services. A renewed focus, if you will, on direct placement on home confinement for those folks that didn't need the services of the halfway house. And essentially, and it goes to the specific question that you asked, is the cumulative effect of First Step Act plus Second Chance Act. I say cumulative. Folks throw out stacking of the two. Inmates commonly refer to it as stacking. Our staff commonly refer to it as stacking. But essentially, it's adding FSA time credits to the Second Chance Act. And that is the singular biggest misconception that's going on right now in the world of FSA. And it's really not an FSA problem. It's a problem of two separate laws. So and I know for a lot of our case managers listening to this, they know this much more than the rest of us. But Second Chance Act has been part of the Bureau of Prisons for quite some time. Second Chance Act was written in 2007, signed into law in 2018. So we're talking about 17, 18 years worth of that. What the Second Chance Act did, amongst other things, the biggest thing that it did was it expanded the Bureau's use of community placement. It allowed us to place inmates at the tail end of their sentence into the community for up to 12 months, 6 months or 10%, which is ever less, to be placed, of that 12 months, could be placed on home confinement. That's what it did. And for the better part of a decade and a half, that's exactly what was happening. Inmates were coming towards the end of their sentences. Generally speaking, the longer their sentences, the more time they were getting. There continues to be a 5-factor review that's involved, and all the case managers know that. There's 5 factors spelled out in the law, not BOP, important to point out. We get a lot of bullets thrown our way over the subjectivity of those 5 factors and the subjectivity behind the amount of placement that inmates get. I want to remind everybody that that's written into the law. The discretionary component of the Second Chance Act is written into the law. Those 5 factors, you could argue some of those are subjective. Resources of the facility contemplated, history and characteristics of the offender. Some of those, you may see those a little bit different than I do. That's why we have case managers, is to make those decisions. So that's what Second Chance Act did. Now, it was successful all that time because as these inmates go out, essentially then we're talking about, realize what I just said, that the maximum amount of time placed in a halfway house at all the RRCs across the country was 12 months. They were designed to do that, relatively short aspect, basically that transition from prison to the community and finally going home, 12 months. And we were, dare I say, we were successful in doing that. Here comes December 2018 and FSA. Now, the two don't marry up nicely together. So now what does FSA do? We've talked about the policy, we've talked about a little bit about the statute. What does FSA do? FSA, by definition, if you're eligible for it, essentially places you in the community for a much, much longer time than was allowable under the Second Chance Act. So barring the easiest way to describe it is, from a math perspective, for every 30 days, you get 15 days in the community, or 15 days either off your sentence, and that would be the first 365 days. Anything in excess of the 365 days, you don't get it off your sentence, but you get it towards your community placement, either in an RRC or home confinement. But play that scenario out. If you have inmates that have longer sentences, let's say 10 years or more, what's going to happen is as we put FSA in our rearview mirror and we have these inmates that are serving these sentences, there's a large portion, almost 50%, give or take, inmates, if they're eligible for it, are actually doing a lot of their time in the community. So what we're seeing is exactly what the FSA intended to see. Nonviolent offenders are being placed in the community quicker, but for longer periods of time. Why is that important when it comes to SCA? Because think of it as if you were running a hotel and you have a certain number of rooms available. Well, if you're coming, Lauren, and you're spending the weekend at the hotel, you're gonna make a reservation for 2 or 3 days, right? Well, if I have other individuals that want rooms in that same hotel, if you're out in 2 or 3 days, no big deal. I have somebody else on Monday, that room's gonna be available. Well, under FSA, that 2 or 3 day placement in the hotel, to use the analogy, has now become, let's say, a 2 or 3 month placement. So think if you're then trying to make a reservation in a hotel and you come and, well, we would love to get Lauren in the hotel, but those rooms are taken. So what's happened is, as a result of FSA, we have inmates that are in the community, specifically in RRC, for long periods of time. It's by design. But what happens is they occupy slots, and there's so many slots to go around. Now we see this happen. I certainly get calls. I know the case managers and unit managers across the bureau are getting calls where they'll have someone approved for a date in a halfway house. The date will be less than what they expected. And the response sometimes our case managers get from the respective RM offices, hey, yeah, that's the best I could do. Well, what happens? The inmates say, they call their family and they say, hey, I was told that the Raleigh RM office can't can't get me in there. Can you call them up? And so what happens? The family members call up the RM office or the RRC. Might call the RRC directly. We find out they do that a lot of times. And the RRC is looking at their facility and they're saying, no, we got plenty of beds. We got 20 beds available. They might, but we're not dealing with beds. We're dealing with contracts and contract quotas. And so even though there may be 20 beds, to use the example in Raleigh, North Carolina, maybe there are 20 beds available in that RRC. They may not be our beds. They may be contracted to others, to a state facility, to a local county. We don't own the beds at any of those facilities. We don't own the beds at any RRC. We contract all RRC placement. We contract all home confinement placement. So there's a finite number of contract slots available. So this is where it gets confusing to a lot of folks, but I think it's important to note, you would think if we could just wave a magic wand and create all this available space out in the community, that would serve us well. The problem is we have 24 RM offices around the country. Every one of those RM offices has local contracts, basically an umbrella over the RRCs that they oversee. As a result of that, let's say, and to use Raleigh as an example, let's say their contract calls for them to house 50 inmates at the RRC. In order for us to go above that 50 number, we have to now go back and renegotiate the contract. So we would love to have additional contractual space at every RRC across the country. The problem is we have to go back and renegotiate each of those contracts. Now, the good news is we're ready to do that. Some of the FSA money, we're looking into it right now, particularly with the deputies' help. We're going through our FSA expenditures with a fine-tooth comb. And what we're hopeful for, and I think we can say this pretty definitively, we're hopeful that we see some of this money that's been allocated in certain ways, that we can maybe drive that more to the reentry side of the house. It's going to be pivotal. It's going to be pivotal. What we ultimately want to see is this. We want to see a inmate comes to mainline, that same reference that I made when I was warden. What I would love to see, and this is where we're headed, we want that inmate to have that time credit worksheet. And that time credit worksheet now shows all these conditional placement days. It's very user-friendly. It's all spelled out, and it's got that magic date on there. And that magic date puts in the FSA days and the recommended, remember, recommended SCA, or Second Chance Act days. So that date's written there. We want then the case managers to do, and the case managers know the referral. It's a 210 referral, but regardless, it is a referral to the halfway house. We want that referral to match what the time credits are, okay? Here's the good news. We're seeing that right now. We're seeing a lot of folks that the time credit worksheets are matching the referrals. Here's the disconnect. When they send that out to the respective RMs across the country, the RMs, going back to the hotel analogy, they're looking at their contractual capacity. And they're saying, I would love to place this inmate on the date requested by the institution. I don't have the room to do that per our contract, right? Not a bed, but contract. And so they then come back and they say, I can't give you this date, but what I can do is I can give you this date. Now, what we've seen is all the dates that we are getting from the RM offices across the country are at least the FSA conditional placement date. Let me say that. The inmates are at least getting their FSA conditional placement date. So I said earlier that we're getting it right on the calculations. Inmates are getting every single day of time credits that they earn and apply, they are being approved by the RM in the community. The misnomer is that SCA time. If they can't get the full, whatever the recommendation is for, let's say the recommendation is for 12 months, and the RM office gives them 30 days. They're coming back, worksheet in hand, and they're saying the dates don't match. Our response to that is we are trying our best. We are getting the FSA right. I would remind folks that the very first factor of the 5-factor review under Second Chance Act is resources of the facility contemplated, in this case, the RRC. If the RRC doesn't have the contractual capacity to give the inmate the date in question, they're going to give them what they can, but they can only give them up to what the contract allows. They're always going to give them the FSA time. They can't always give the full benefit of the SCA recommended time. Very important point to note. I would say to you, as folks are listening to this, folks are probably thinking, well, how are you going to fix that? We're going to fix it by getting the resources, steering it towards the Reentry Services Division, revisiting the contracts, upping those quotas, and hopefully we get to a point in the not so distant future where the time credit worksheet is going to match the referral, which is going to match the date that the inmate is going to the community.
Well, Rick, what's on the horizon for FSA? What can you tell us?
Well, I would like to tell you that we're getting this right. That Director Marshall has made it clear to me, clear to everybody that's working on this, is that we can't get this wrong. We're going to get this right. I know there's frustration out there in the field as far as how long this takes. To that, I say it's taken us a long time to get to the point where we're at. And so it's going to take a little bit of time for us to steer the ship in the right direction. I'm glad to report, as I went over during our conversation today, some of the recent improvements that we've made. Keep in mind, a lot of these improvements have been made within the last several months. So we are making incredible progress towards getting this right. I think the next big step for us as we kind of dive into all this is we see where the misstep is, or we see where we need to focus on. Yeah. And that was clear in our conversations between that missing piece, or the perception between First Step Act and Second Chance Act. Get the communication out there, get the training out there. We've already got some of the training tools. We're going to have more training. Training is going to be forthcoming. This is going to be a focus of what we're doing. We're going to make sure that the folks that are in there that are doing the right thing do things like this. Get on top of the communication. Get it out there. And so make sure that folks realize that Second Chance Act is the law. There's discretion within that law. And so they have to understand that it's different than FSA. There's going to continue to be subjectivity in Second Chance Act. There's no getting around that. The BOP, we're following the law. Now, where we need to focus, as I said earlier, where we need to focus is that I think the next step is making sure, doing everything that we possibly can to get inmates everything that they can under the Second Chance Act, everything that they can. That is going to mean revisiting these contracts in the community. The resources, as I said, we got, I think it was $409 million for FSA spending money. We need to take a portion of that and devote that to our community resources. We need to go in and we need to start negotiating those contracts, getting those quotas up. And I can tell you we're starting that process. And as we get through that process, and it's not going to be easy, but as we get through those, it's going to be a win. We're going to see. Ultimately, to the director, everyone involved with this, what we want to see at the end of the day is that there are no questions. Everything makes sense. You've earned those time credits. You've applied those time credits. You're placed in the community consistent with the time credits and the Second Chance Act recommendation. That's what we want to see when there's no longer folks asking the question, hey, why are my dates not matching up? We want those dates to match up. We want the folks to go home. We want the folks to go into the community and see their loved ones. We get no benefit from inmates staying in prison longer than they need to. And so we are making, it's important to note, and the director has made this clear, we are doing everything that we can to get FSA right, and we're going to get it right.
If there was one thing that you would want the audience to take away from today, what would that be?
Well, I would hope they would take away a lot from what we talked about today. But the one thing that I would stress is the distinction between the FSA law and the Second Chance Act law, and really the discretionary portion that exists within the Second Chance Act. FSA, the inmates are going to get the time credits that they earned, the time credits applied, and they're going to be placed in the community on those dates. The Second Chance Act still remains under the law discretionary. Yes, we are combining them, stacking them, cumulative if you will, but the discretionary component still exists. So there's no guarantee that the recommendations under SCA are going to be granted while in the community. It's an important distinction. We will do our best, but it's important to note that remains discretionary as defined in the law.
Rick, this has been great. I really do appreciate the update, and we really do appreciate your expertise and dedication to this issue. To our audience, stay tuned for more updates from BOP. And remember, we're here to support successful reentry every step of the way. To stay in the know, please visit our website, www.bop.gov, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook, X, and LinkedIn. Thank you.